you are not here or whether you are here, if you wish to participate in our Inquirers class for visitors and newcomers, it will be live in the Commons room next week as of this moment. It is a moving target. And directly after today's service, everyone is invited to join the last virtual coffee hour that we'll be having. So you can do that online as well. Information on how to get to that event will appear on the screen and in the chat box at the end of the service. And you can also access it from the homepage of our website at ERUUF.org. So here's the thing, for those of you who are in the room, we know you can't see the screen, and one of the things that we're asking you to make sure to not do is please don't take out your telephone or any other device and decide to watch the service from your device, because it will use up the bandwidth and it will interfere with our live streaming. So we ask if you would please not do that in this room. You can, if you were elsewhere on campus, you'd be welcome to do that, but please do not do that in this room. And for those of you on Sunday teams, that'll be something to remember to let others know in the future as well. So Reverend Deborah Cayer and I are your preachers this morning. Today's music is provided by Kate Lewis on piano, and Claudia Kaplan is our cantor. Today's tech team is Jenny Jolly and Sean Trimble, and Jim Van Verth is our sound engineer. So let us now center ourselves into this time, this space, or whatever space that you're in. Let us all center ourselves together. And let us all take a deep breath in and let it out. And we continue with Kate Lewis on our prelude.
What a sight. People here in the sanctuary for the first time in 18 months. How can there not be tears? A letting go of pent-up sorrow and grief, all mixed with an outpouring of joy. Come in, don't be shy. Bring your full self. It's okay if it feels slightly weird to you, because it does to everyone else too. And if you're watching from home or some other place, We feel your presence. You're right here with us too, in our minds and in our hearts. This is the time, and this is the place. For all of us, wherever we are, this is the time to catch a spiritual breath that can never be touched by any virus. This is the space for what is most important: the truth of your experience, what your body knows, for the meaning that you have made from it all. What's negative belongs here too: our shame, our anger, our sorrow, our sense of helplessness and overwhelm. Bring it all and let it be transformed. Because here too is the grace of a greater love that receives us just as we are, that takes what we release out for recycling, leaving us open and free, able to meet life with honesty and kindness and flexibility once more.
Hear these words of the poet Denise Levertov. As swimmers dare to lie face to the sky, and water bears them, and hawks rest upon air, and air sustains them, so would I learn to attain free fall and float into Creator's Spirit's deep resonance, deep embrace, knowing no effort earns that all surrounding grace. We light our chalice this morning for the love that receives us as we are, that will not let us go in the worst of times and the best of times, and for the spiritual gifts it plants within us for our own well-being and for the world's. We will sing now together, Wake Now My Senses. Claudia Kaplan will lead us, and do you know what song that is in the hymnal?
98.
It's number 298 for those of you who have hymnals. And you may remain seated.
Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation.
Hello, my name is Cameron Smith, and I'm one of the co-founders and the current executive director of Communities in Partnership. Communities in Partnership was founded in Northeast Central Durham, founded by majority Black and women-led folks in the community to kind of come together during an unfortunate event that had happened in our neighborhood in the fall of 2011. We decided that the lack of us coming together collectively as neighbors, as a people, was the reason why we had the unfortunate incident where 3 children were injured and a gentleman was injured while walking down the street one Sunday afternoon. So we started coming together, getting to know one another, and beginning to figure out how we wanted to better our community, how best we wanted to move forward, and how we could actually make Northeast Central Durham known for the vibrant, beautiful community that we've all come to deeply love and care about. And so Communities in Partnership was born out of the perspective that people that are the most directly impacted actually have the tools and the keys for their own liberation. So we focus on 4 key pillar areas. Where we were founded and rooted in is our anti-racism development and leadership training, which also encompasses workforce development and training and career readiness as well. We have also have our housing component. A lot of our community in Durham understand that Durham as a whole is gentrifying in terms of especially the city center communities. And so we came together with the help of self-help, partnering with us to actually purchase 6 units of multifamily housing in our neighborhood to maintain affordability as well as dignified, clean, and beautiful housing for folks in our community. The third area is our food systems work, which I think most people know us for, is we started off with a food co-op in our community that's been run and sustained by people who have issues in the system of food apartheid, the lack of access that's been intentionally built to have a tiered structure. The more money and access and resources you have, the healthier your food and your health outcomes. And so we created our own food co-op to be able to address that, as well as we launched last summer our East Durham Farmers Market, which is a farmers market collaboration with the 45 to 50 Black and Indigenous farmers that are a part of our network that we purchase fresh fruit from multiple times each month. And then the last part of our portion of our food systems is our Culinary Femme Collective initiative, which is made up of BIPOC Femme identifying majority women of color, food entrepreneurs that are seeking wealth building strategies in their own business creation that aren't predicated on the slave wages and oppressive business techniques that the food industry has really just is known for. And so those are the wonderful things that we're doing in addition to the Thriving Communities Fund. I know many of you have supported that. We will be announcing actually the week of August the 16th, we have chosen our 7 first cohorts, that cohort Thrive Community Fund Fellows that will be receiving $10,000 each to launch or to stabilize and to expand their value-added food component. We'll be making those announcements August the 16th. So be on the lookout for that. And so we, as you can see, we also have a major emphasis on entrepreneurship and wealth building strategies as well. And so we just really appreciate our wonderful friends at the Eno River Unitarian Universalist Fellowship for coming alongside of us. And we just encourage you to build relationship and also to partner with us in resources to help us continue building not only resiliency, but also sustainability and systems that are owned by Black folk, for Black folk, with Black folk, specifically Black folks that are directly impacted in Northeast Central Durham, so that we will not have the major level of displacement that unfortunately that we have begun seeing in this area, especially with all the recent news about Google and Apple and Clorox and Nike coming. And so we know that we know what's best for our communities. We know what's best how to take care of them. And if we given the opportunity and the resources, the recreation of systems that aren't predicated on charity, that is the best way to solve and alleviate poverty, is give people back the wealth that was created off their backs. And so we just really appreciate how you guys stand firm with us in an anti-racism perspective and ethic. And we really appreciate Jacqueline's leadership and the leadership and the example that Eno River Unitarian Universalist has been amongst many different struggles that we've had as the community of Durham, this beautiful community, the best place to live on the face of the earth, struggles to maintain and be who we say we are. So we thank you for helping to work towards a bigger and a brighter Durham where everybody is thriving. Thank you so much.
So that presentation was by Cameron Smith, who is, as some of you may have heard, Executive Director of Communities in Partnership. And the reason for her presentation is that 6 times a year, our Generosity Sunday team selects an organization within the community beyond our walls to receive a special collection from us in support of their good work. These organizations are nominated by members of the congregation, and if any of you are interested in nominating a group, you'll find the application to do so on our website under Generosity Sunday in the Justice section. And so today, and you'll hear more about this during the Offertory, we will be taking up a special collection for Communities in Partnership, which is based in East Durham.
I can't stop smiling. Our first reading this morning is by Mickey Scott Bay Jones. She is an activist, healer, a movement chaplain, a nonviolence practitioner. This is her invitation to brave space. Together, we will create brave space because there is no such thing as safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and we all have caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard in other places. We call each other to more truth and more love. We have the right to start somewhere and to continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. Creating spaces that are safe is admirable, and our addiction to safety, I sometimes wonder if it's more about comfort or lack of conflict. This is sometimes devolved into long periods of developing a list of rules for every possible way of relating to one another, where the focus is more on the policing of tone, language, and surface behavior. But the framework of inviting each other into brave space is, at its core, a baseline agreement to be in authentic relationship. Its focus is on becoming skillful in navigating the messiness of different starting points, divesting from perfection, working at the speed of relationship, attending to our own frustrations, and practicing accountability, transformative justice, repair, even separation in generative ways that create more liberation in the midst of this work, not just as a result of it. One of the most lovely things about the words brave space is how different communities have adapted them for themselves, co-creating a way of talking about how they want to be together that works for them. And isn't that brave? It takes so much courage to try to create a community over and over again, considering the human need. Mickey Scott Bay Jones.
So I too cannot say enough how wonderful it is to see your faces, and I also am my face is hurting from trying to not smile as much as I want to smile. You know, it's been over a year of speaking to a practically empty sanctuary, or talking to a computer screen and a microphone and a camera and hoping that we're connecting. I also just want to say welcome to those of you who are live streaming. We are all in learning mode of how to be present together, both within this room and also within other rooms, other spaces and places, both here in Durham and in places far away. So with that, I bid all of you, all of us, welcome. It is good to be together. Yesterday, as Reverend Cayer gathered the worship associates for a meeting, she opened our check-in with the question, what book or movie title would best describe the state of your life right now? What a great opening question. And I sat there thinking and thinking and thinking. There were tons of titles going through my mind. And what I settled on for me is the title, The Ground is Shifting, Shifting, Shifting Beneath My Feet, and I am pivoting, pivoting, pivoting. It is a vast understatement to acknowledge that the world is in an incredible state of flux and change right now, whether we are talking about viruses, vaccines, and our health, housing, jobs, and the economy, voting, racial and gender justice, or the state of our democracy. And while, unfortunately, none of this is new, it has reached a level of pitch and intensity that cannot, indeed must not, be ignored. Just as we might believe that things have settled into place, even for a small moment, the ground beneath our feet shifts, and we must find our balance and pivot. It is difficult for us to know from one moment to the next what is coming, what we will be confronted by, which brings up all sorts of emotions, frustrations, anxieties, worries, fears. I know what I'm talking about, just saying. And uncertainty. None of us can any longer cling to illusions of safety. The times instead call for us to be brave and very courageous, beginning in our hearts and expanding out into our actions in the world. And rather than attempting to stand upon ever shaky ground, we are called instead to center ourselves upon the ground of all being, which truly holds us, steadies us. Anchor our balance there. And if we must pivot, this is what we pivot to. The steadiness of a center that grounds us to the earth, while also reminding us that we are made of light and stardust, energy, and ultimately, we are children of the universe. And we can simply begin there, fortified in the knowledge of what is essential about ourselves and bravely encountering the world from that space. This is what I constantly remind myself to do. This is how I pivot. One of the ways that Reverend Cayer and I have been clear about moving into our new normal of physically returning to ERUUF, no matter how unsteady that return might seem day to day, is by not simply welcoming everyone back, but by shifting and naming radical as a way of welcoming. Now, we've talked about being radical in the past, such as when we've spoken about radical hospitality. But I'm not simply referring to a new phrase du jour or a cool new approach we're taking as part of our reopening. You see, earlier this year, some of us participated in a transgender inclusion in congregations workshop facilitated by the Transforming Hearts Collective. And if you missed it, do keep an eye on e-news as it will be offered again this program year by Pride Plus and the Multicultural team, thanks to a grant from the ERUUF Foundation. What the Transforming Hearts Collective shared with us gave me such an expanded view of what it means to be radically welcoming of all folks, and I have not stopped thinking about it since. Radical comes from the Latin meaning root, or the Middle English meaning forming the roots. So when we talk about radical, we are talking about the inherent nature of something, the root of it all, and it most often implies a very fundamental change in tradition. Radical also means innovative and sometimes unorthodox. So what does it mean to make a fundamental change in how we welcome one another and those who are new here? I'll start by letting you all know that this is not about a list of things to do in order to be a better visitor host or greeter or worship associate or class facilitator. It is more about how we take on new ways of being. Because when we are committed to being in that ever unfolding stage of becoming, the things to do will automatically follow. Being radically welcoming is rooted in three fundamental things, and those are relationship, transformation, and belonging. It is less about the welcome table and more about the process, the ongoing process of what Episcopal priest Stephanie Spellers calls a fundamental spiritual practice, one that combines the universal ministry of welcome and hospitality with a clear awareness of power and patterns of inclusion and exclusion. This is how we begin a process of moving beyond our to-do lists, which are important. We do need to know what our logistics are on Sunday morning. But we want to move toward embodiment and new ways of being, which might mean logistics will change. It is an ongoing process of being aware and confronting power and patterns of inclusion and exclusion. This is very important. And as some of you might suspect, it is also a process that will and should lead us past our comfort zone, no matter what our background is. It's an invitation to what Mickey Scott Bay Jones said is in the reading Deb offered, to creating brave space together. A space in which we are willing to lean into our discomfort and with humility and a learner's heart to be transformed by one another, by our learning, by our mistakes, by the messiness as we strive in our commitment together. And as we invite others to join us in doing the same, they will transform us by what they bring, their lives, their stories and wisdom, and we will also transform them by our own, which is right in line with our mission of this fellowship, which is to transform lives by building a free and inclusive covenantal religious community of spirit, service, justice, and love. We are not simply transforming lives out there, but we are allowing our lives right here to be transformed through mutual acts of being in relationship with others. But in so doing, it's important for us not to become bogged down in shame, guilt, blame, or fear of change, all of which can become paralyzing, causing us not to move forward or becoming an excuse for maintaining the status quo with its existing traditions and systems and power structures, or, and this could be any of us, simply walking away from the work at hand because that's easier to do. But as the Reverend Stephen Charleston, a former dean of Episcopal Divinity School, has said, the call to take on the challenges of radical welcome is for the growth of the community, not only in its numbers, but in its spirit, imagination, and strength. I believe that if we take on the call, truly embrace the call to become radically welcoming through these three things. One, our willingness to be in relationship, especially with those we do not know. And two, to seeing ourselves and our community be transformed as a result of being in relationship, especially with those who have not typically and fully been included. And three, together, creating a brave space in which people are not only welcomed, but know in their bones that they belong here. I believe if we commit to the process and heart-centered practices of embodying these over the course of this coming program year, we will begin to make some inherent and fundamental changes in becoming a radically welcoming congregation. As Stephanie Speller says, this is all about the transformation and opening of individual hearts, congregations, and systems so that the other might find in our community a warm place and mutual embrace, and so that we are finally free to embrace and be transformed by authentic relationship with folks so often relegated to the margins. May it be so, my friends. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be.
I invite you to join me in the spirit of prayer and spoken meditation. These are the words of our colleague, Victoria Safford. It hit your heart? Asked a tiny Unitarian Universalist theologian, 3 years old, as his parents were talking about what this congregation means to them. They were a little emotional, and he was a little concerned. And so he asked, "You mean it hit your heart?" "Yes," said his mom, in a good way. "It hits my heart. It touches my soul. It saves my life. It knows my kids and loves them. It makes me cry. It makes me think. It makes me feel. It holds me up. It gives me hope. I'm forced to sing. I'm asked to care. I asked for help. It gave me help. It needs my help. It hits my heart. It heals my heart. It grows my soul. It serves the world. It calls me out. It calls me in. These are the things I hear you say all the time when you talk about your congregation in the new member classes and board meetings, youth group, committees, coffee hour, Wednesday dinner, choir. We come here to crack our hearts wide open, and that is a hard and holy way to do religion in this world right now. We crack open our hearts and throw open the door singing, "Come, come, whoever you are." We pick up a lot of strays here, said someone some years ago, and I'm one of them. We all are. We all come seeking some kind of sanctuary, don't we? Some kind of grace. All seeking to love and be loved with unwavering love, and to shine the light of that beyond these walls. Let's sit in the midst of those good words for a few moments in silence. This morning we hold in our hearts all who struggle and all who mourn, and also all who jump for joy, who are delighted by new babies, new accomplishments, new passions and pursuits. May our hearts ever be cracked open by this beloved community to the mystery and wonder of life and the possibility of goodness, especially in times that seem hopeless. May it ever be so. Ashe, blessed be. Amen.
Our next reading is What They Dreamed to Be Ours to Do by Rebecca Parker. We must never tire of asking the question that the rich young ruler put to Jesus, who is my neighbor? And we must never abandon the path Gautama followed, seeing as he did who our neighbor is and what the condition of their life and therefore our life is. We must seek and continue to seek until in whatever forest we find, the illumination comes to us in our time, as it came to George Fox in the wilderness of seeking, and to many forebears in the faith, in the community of resistance, that there is a universal love of which we are a part, that there is something that will not let us go. And it is in obedience to this truth that the promise of life is fulfilled in us and we become a blessing to the world. Whether we know, as theologian Bill Jones described it, as a fierce rebellion lodged in the human heart that will rage against oppression and injustice and fight it to the end out of sheer cantankerousness of spirit, with nothing to sustain it beyond passionate determination. Or know it with tenderness of one who has passed through the valley of suicidal despair and found there a divine comforter who has never left and will never leave, who embraces even the violators of every covenant within the fire of redeeming love. The experience of brokenness becomes the place of revelation. And the revelation found there is what will fuel a new covenant. The finding of that deep center is often through the fire of broken hearts. Stillness that listens and rage that protests will guide us to a new covenant. If we will have the courage to not flee from our tears and to embody what we come to know in everyday practices. That was Rebecca Parker.
So when Jacqueline first mentioned the topic of radical welcome, I immediately recalled that radical means to go to the root, the bottom, the place of origin where things ultimately begin, as she said. A place so deep that Rebecca Parker tells us that it's often found at the bottom of our own brokenheartedness, the place of despair where we come to the end of what we know. Parker names several who have experienced this. The young prince Gautama. How do you say it? Gautama. You say Gautama? Gautama. Different schools. Diversity, it's a wonderful thing. The young prince Gautama, who saw the suffering of his fellow human beings for the very first time, that caused him to leave his throne to wander in search of new meaning and new hope. He so desperately wanted to know how to respond to life's suffering after seeing it for the first time. George Fox, along with others in 17th century England who were devastated after they had risked everything to restore Charles I to the throne, only to have the king and his advisors, Cromwell and others, betray their deepest beliefs. Many people at the time fell into deep despair and they turned to widespread rioting and destruction. Others, like George Fox, became seekers, giving up everything to wander in the country, to sleep outside, look for new answers. Fox preached in fields and marketplaces to all who were also seeking a restored hope. Contemporary theologian Bill T. Jones, who named the fierce rage that rises up against oppression as a kind of cleansing, holy fire. And we can see this so clearly in everyone who's been in the streets over the past year calling for racial justice. Protesters who've been interviewed have shown deep anger and also clarity, dignity, determination, and ultimately a kind of radical love for humanity. Parker names a period in her own life when she was in the grip of suicidal despair. And in that time, she had an experience of the presence of a love which would not let her go. And it led her to understand that the experience of brokenness becomes the place of revelation, and that the revelation found there is what will fuel a new covenant. Covenant being just another name for relationship, intentional relationship by choice. All of these examples make me think about the despair that many of us are feeling, at the impact of persistent racism that continues to blatantly steal the dreams, the wealth, and lives of brown and black people. The despair that we feel at climate change, wildfires and drought, intense hurricanes and floods. Despair, too, over politicians who are willing to betray our Constitution and our democracy just to stay in favor with their constituents who, having been fed a pack of lies, now believe impossible and dangerous things. And the pandemic. Some of us caught a glimpse of normal. It was delicious. Normal was delicious. And we had a brief experience of renewed hope earlier this summer when the CDC declared that if we were vaccinated, we could safely take off our masks, only to discover that the Delta variant is spreading with intensity and impact far greater than the original virus, and that people who are still resisting the vaccine are almost certain to become very ill, and at the same time are putting everyone else at risk, especially the most vulnerable among us, children under 12, people whose immune systems cannot accept the vaccine. And we're watching our hope over the ending of the pandemic vanish, seemingly. I've heard from many people who've shared their deep despair as they contemplate a world in which COVID becomes the new normal for the foreseeable future. How can that be? We had such hope. So what are you feeling these days? Confusion? Fear? Anger? What makes you want to rant and rage? What fills you with dread and despair? When you find yourself pushed to the limits of your knowledge and your understanding and your skill, what do you find there at the root of it all? A great abyss? An endless emptiness? In a time of tremendous despair in my own life, I found myself at that place. I was totally lost because one of my daughters was in a tremendous crisis and there was nothing we could do about it. Believe me, we tried. I couldn't even make it through the day at that point without crying. And so every day I would leave work, I would go home for lunch, and I would sit on the couch and I would sob into a pillow until it was wet to the touch. And then I'd have some soup and I'd go back to work, even though I had no hope and I could not imagine the future. And then one day, after I had cried myself empty, I became slowly aware that I was not alone. A loving presence was there with me. It was so real. A presence that was far wider and deeper, greater by far than my pain and my emptiness. And I knew without a doubt that I was loved beyond measure. And that even though I couldn't figure out anything to do, somehow more was possible than I could make happen on my own. I had the sense that there was no place to fall except into love, which led me to believe that no matter what, I and everyone else would somehow ultimately be okay. My experience didn't change a thing around me, but it changed me. And something lifted, and I was able to go forward with confidence, even though I didn't know where or how I was going. Linda Hill is a professor at Harvard Business School who teaches business leaders how to lead teams for innovative breakthroughs. Professor Hill says that if you're seeking something brand new that did not exist before, the leader's job is to create a space where team members can bring their very different ideas and debate with each other. The leader's job is to encourage the tension of all those differences and to allow those differences to pull in different directions, which ultimately somehow it opens up a space for something totally new, something totally innovative that no one had thought of before. Einstein famously once observed, and I'm paraphrasing, "The thinking that got us here is not the thinking that's going to get us out of here." We cannot just back up and start over. Wouldn't that be wonderful if we could just retrace our steps and do it over? We can't. Nor can we just add more of the same and expect something different to happen. It's not going to happen either. But if we show up with the best that we've got, and if we allow our differences to interact with the best that others have brought, even though this causes friction, the resulting tension can open up a space in which something completely new, completely innovative, perhaps even revelatory might happen. And it might just be the thing that can save us. It's out of something like this that a new covenant, a new agreement becomes possible. We make covenants with our promises and our commitments. And our most important covenants always include the sacred, however hidden or obscure or mysterious it so often is. So we include the sacred by including the values and principles that we have discovered coming out of such ultimate moments. And by being faithful to those values and principles as best we're able to keep our covenant with each other. Here's the thing. When we do all this, something drops into place, and there's this radical sense of homecoming and belonging way down deep at our core. A sense of assurance fills us that we are welcome just as we are. And this radical experience of acceptance and sense of belonging feels like love, because it is an experience of sacred love. And sacred love is fundamentally, radically transformative. We don't have to go to Harvard Business School to find this. We don't have to be Jesus. We don't have to be Buddha or Einstein in order to practice either. We just have to be ourselves. We just have to show up for whatever life is offering, and we have to be present as best we can, and then act in the ways of love. We follow the aphorisms, the wisdom that all the traditions have left us about how to act in loving ways. Love is patient and love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it doesn't dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it doesn't delight in evil but rejoices with the good. That's how Paul explained love to the community in Corinth when they found themselves in a terrible mess. He wasn't prescribing this path during a time of peace and ease. He was offering some very desperate people a lifeline in the midst of terrible stress and struggle that threatened the early Christian movement. Today, we can also listen to activists who've come through trouble with hard-won, authentic love and wisdom to share. Mickey Scott Bay Jones, who offers us the idea of brave space instead of safe space. So much more can happen there because of our differences. If we show up for love with courage, just as we are, with all of our fear and all of our sorrow and all of our despair and our mess, just bring the mess. What love might we find? Or what love might find us? And never let us go. And what renewed covenant might we make then? In this morning's first hymn, we sang about ways to wake our senses in order to be faithful, and how we can do this by giving and receiving as love shows us how. The path of love is not easy. It requires discipline and dedication. But countless others have told us that if we choose this radical path, a way forward will open up and we will find our way into the future. Not as solo survivors, but as part of a team, a community, in which all are welcome and all are beloved, and it's everyone's job to make it possible for everyone else to shine and thrive. In other words, it's everyone's job to love. May it ever be so. Amen. This morning, we heard from the wonderful group, Communities in Partnership, which are practicing some of these radical innovative ways of creating change right here in our own city. And so this morning, contributions in excess of regular pledges will be given to communities in partnership as part of our Generosity Sunday offering. At this time, you can go online and go through our portal, a secure portal on our website if you would like to give. In here in the sanctuary, there's a cash box which you can drop cash or a check into if that's better for you at the end of the service. We're doing contactless offering. All the things, right? We will figure out how to do this, but right now, let's take a breath as we listen to the offertory. We give thanks for all of the gifts so generously given that help to weave the fabric of this beloved community and weave us and our values into the larger life of the world beyond our doors. What a blessing. We're going to sing together one last time. The last hymn this morning is Lean on Me. You'll find it in the teal hymnal. I can't remember the number, but you'll find it. It's in the teal hymnal. Claudia will lead us. I don't know the number.
1021.
Thanks.
Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow. But if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need son, my sister, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you understand. We all need somebody to lean on. Lean won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on.
So our closing words this morning are once again the words of Mickey Scott Bay Jones. Together we will create brave space because there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and we have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth, more love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. Go in peace, my friends. Go in love, and may your life be a blessing. Ashe and amen.